Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Meredith Beavin, a pharmacist with a fascination for true crime. And I'm here with my wife and co host, Andy. Today, we're diving into the world of medications, the ones that can heal or turn deadly. So sit back, relax, listen, and learn. This is The Medicine Murders. Welcome back to The Medicine Murders. I'm Dr. Meredith Beavin, joined by my co-host, Andy.
Hey.
Today, we're discussing a method of execution that was intended to be humane. Lethal injection. Designed to be clinical, painless, and efficient.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
See where I took it?
Yeah.
Interesting. A way to take a life with as little suffering as possible. But when the drugs don't work as intended, the process can be anything but painless. Real quick before we do that, I was talking to my mailman the other day, and he's an avid listener of our podcast.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know his name. I should probably ask next time. I call him the mailman. He's really nice. He said that I made a mistake in the last episode. Oh, no, the paroxetine murders.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said a word fumble.
A word?
You said you kind of messed up. You said double homicide and then immediately said triple homicide. And I was like, oh, you're right. It was a triple homicide. So I just want everyone to know I'm not a professional. I'm reading. And I'm sometimes bad at reading. Andy has to constantly stop me and tell me to slow down.
Yeah. Well, you get very excited.
I get excited.
And you just tend to start stumbling a little bit.
Yeah.
When you're getting so into telling me about it.
Yeah. Sometimes I go a little quick.
And I'm like,
slow down.
Okay, slow your roll and pronounce your words so that everybody can understand.
But I'm not ashamed to correct myself. Corrections corner as it was.
Yep.
So back to our podcast. Today's episode, lethal injections. Today, I'm going to name this one When Lethal Injections Go Wrong. Is that a good name for this episode?
Sure.
Okay. You never have a say in the name.
I don't. Because I'm not good with names. Like, I don't come up with good names for stuff.
It's okay. No, I just choose it all.
With a cute little catchy song or like something like that, but the name of a podcast
it's tough. It's tough. It gets me go. I mean,
it gets good.
It gets me. It gets me. Like it makes me like take like 10, 15 minutes each time before I come up with a name.
Yeah.
I come up with like 10 names.
Yeah.
But okay. We're recording in a different place today, so you guys might hear some backup noise.
Yeah.
Like a dog snoring and or other humans in the house.
Yep.
But hopefully GarageBand will have some noise gate on here.
Start doing it at my work.
Yeah, I will.
A solid time.
Yeah.
Because like Kelly said we could.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, back to this. Lethal injections. So this is how today's story going to go. I was like, so I'm going to do lethal injections because we know what lethal injection, it's medicine. Medicine used to harm, as is this podcast. But I was like, I can't get rid of the murder part, right? So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to talk about two men. I'm going to talk about their horrific crimes, then their lethal injections and how they went wrong. And then we're going to kind of discuss the history of no, not lethal injections. Execution. Got that word for a second. So we're going to talk about the evolution of executions.
Okay.
And then we're going to talk about the medicine.
Cool.
Does that sound cool?
Yeah. I'm excited.
So it begins.
Yeah.
Two men, Clayton Lockett and Joseph Wood, were sentenced to die. The state attempted to execute them through lethal injection, but the results were horrific. Lockett regained consciousness mid-execution, thrashing against his restraints, trying to speak, where Wood gasped for air more than 600 times, struggling for nearly 2 hours before his body finally gave out. Lethal injection has been the dominant method of execution in the U.S. since the 1980s. But cases like these raise questions about its effectiveness, ethics, and the medical failures that sometimes turn an execution into prolonged suffering. So today we'll begin with the crimes that put Lockett and Wood on death row, then explore the history of lethal injections and other executions, why lethal injection was introduced and how it became the primary execution method. We'll walk through these botched executions, examine what went wrong medically, and break down the pharmacology behind it all. What these drugs are designed to do and why they sometimes fail. This is the medicine murders. Let's get started.
All right.
So Clayton Lockett, the man who buried his victim alive. It's June 3rd, 1999 in Perry, Oklahoma. A quiet town, the kind where people feel safe leaving their doors unlocked. Stephanie Neiman was 19 years old, strong-willed, independent, and proud of it. She had just graduated high school and bought herself a brand new truck. That night, Stephanie and a friend were out driving when they stopped at a house. What they didn't know was that inside, Clayton Lockett and 2 accomplices were already committing a violent crime. They had beaten the man inside, tied him up, and taken control of the house. When Stephanie knocked on the door, she became an obstacle. Lockett and his men forced them inside at gunpoint. Her friend was assaulted while Stephanie was made to watch. Then Lockett demanded her truck keys. She refused and she fought back. Lockett shot her once, then again. But she was still alive, still fighting. Instead of ending it quickly, Lockett and his men dragged her to a ditch, forced her to lie down, and buried her alive. She suffocated under the dirt. Clayton Lockett was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and rape. In 2000, he was sentenced to death. So we're going to fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
April 29, 2014. The Oklahoma State Penitentiary. Clayton Lockett lay strapped to his execution table. The room was sterile and cold. Witnesses, including journalists, attorneys, and the families of the victims, sat behind a glass window, waiting to watch what was supposed to be a quick and efficient execution. The state planned to use a three-drug cocktail. Midazolam to induce unconsciousness, vercuronium to paralyze the muscles, potassium chloride to stop the heart. At 6:23 p.m., executioners inserted an IV into Lockett's tissue rather than his vein, meaning the drugs were not properly circulating into his bloodstream. The execution began. Midazolam was administered, and within minutes, Lockett's body should have gone limp as he slipped into unconsciousness. That was what the state promised, but something went horribly wrong. At 6:33 p.m., Lockett's eyes suddenly opened. Witnesses saw him clenching his jaw, withering, trying to lift his head off the gurney. His whole body started convulsing. He was trying to speak, but his words were slurred and strained. Prison officials panicked. They closed the curtains, shielding the public from what was turning into a nightmare. The drugs were not entering the bloodstream properly. Lockett's body fought against the paralysis, struggling violently for several minutes, gasping for air. Officials halted the execution at 33 minutes, but Lockett ultimately died 43 minutes after the first drug was administered. Then Joseph Wood. August 7th, 1989, Tucson, Arizona. Joseph Wood had spent years terrorizing his ex-girlfriend, Deborah Dietz. He had a history of stalking, domestic violence, and threats. She tried everything to escape him, restraining orders, police involvement, but nothing stopped him. That morning, Wood walked into Dietz & Sons Auto Repair, where Deborah worked with her father, Eugene. He pulled out a .38 revolver and shot Eugene in the chest, killing him instantly. Then, in front of multiple witnesses, he turned to Deborah, raised the gun, and fired twice. When police arrived, Wood was still standing over her body. He was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death in 1991. So now we're going to fast forward. The weird part is both of these executions occurred in 2014. So July 23rd, 2014, Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence. Joseph Wood was strapped to the execution table. This time, the drug protocol was different. Arizona decided to use a 2-drug combination. Midazolam, a sedative, and hydromorphone, a powerful opioid. This combination had never been tested in execution before. The drugs were supposed to put Wood to sleep, slow his breathing, and eventually stop his heart. At 1:52 p.m., the first drug entered his system. Within minutes, Wood should have lost consciousness, but that's not what happened. Instead of slipping under, Wood began gasping involuntarily due to respiratory depression. Witnesses counted over 600 individual gasps. His execution lasted 1 hour and 57 minutes. So let's go back and talk about the evolution of execution.
Okay.
For centuries, execution wasn't meant to be humane. It was meant to be public, painful, and humiliating. The goal was to make an example out of the condemned. For most of U.S. history, hanging was the standard method of execution, but it was far from reliable. If the rope was too short, the prisoner strangled to death, sometimes taking minutes to die. If the rope was too long, the force would sever the spine or even decapitate them. And sometimes the noose failed completely, leaving the condemned alive, forcing officials to try again. And then came the electric chair. As states searched for a more scientific execution method, they introduced the electric chair in 1890. It was supposed to be quick and painless, but in reality, it often turned into a gruesome spectacle. Prisoners sometimes caught fire, their skin blackening. Some convulsed violently for minutes, and some prisoners needed multiple shocks, officials restarting the process again and again. The first person executed by electric chair was William Kemmler in 1890. One of the most infamous botched cases was Willie Francis in 1946. His execution failed, and Louisiana had to execute him again a year later. By the 1920s, the gas chamber was introduced, using hydrogen cyanide gas. It was marketed as a cleaner, more modern execution method. But it wasn't as painless as promised. Some prisoners gasped, choked, and convulsed for over 10 minutes before dying. Others suffered prolonged agony as their bodies fought desperately for oxygen. Then came lethal injection. In 1977, Oklahoma became the first state to approve lethal injection as a more humane alternative. The process involved administering. Okay, thank you. And a series of drugs to sedate, paralyze, and stop the heart of the condemned. The first execution by lethal injection took place in Texas in 1982, using a 3-drug protocol. 1, sodium thiopental or pentobarbital, an anesthetic to induce unconsciousness. Next was vecuronium bromide, a pyrolytic agent to prevent movement and respiration, and then potassium chloride that stops the heart, causing death. Initially seen as a clean and efficient process, lethal injection soon faced its own set of problems. Botched executions left prisoners gasping for air, convulsing, or remaining conscious longer than expected. As pharmaceutical companies refused to supply execution drugs, states struggled to find reliable alternatives, leading to untested and controversial drug combinations. Today, lethal injections remains primary method of execution in the U.S., but is increasingly under scrutiny. Some states have halted executions, while others have explored alternatives like nitrogen, hypoxia, or even the return of the firing squad. So the point of this podcast is the medications. And now we're going to go through the talk nerdy part.
Okay.
Or the medications used in lethal injection, right?
Okay.
So lethal injection was originally designed as a 3-drug protocol. Sodium thiopental to induce unconsciousness, vecuronium bromide, a paralytic, and potassium chloride, the chemical that caused cardiac arrest by disrupting the heart's electrical signals. Mm-hmm. This method was widely used from the 1980s to the early 2010s. But then in 2011, everything changed. For decades, sodium thiopental was the gold standard sedative in executions. It worked quickly, knocking the prisoner unconscious before the other drugs were administered. But in 2011, can you guess what happened?
Somebody didn't go unconscious. They felt everything.
No. The only U.S. manufacturer stopped making it.
What?
So European pharmaceutical companies followed suit, banning their drugs from being used in executions.
Oh.
So if you had to have an idea about pharmaceutical companies, probably a bad rep would be using their drugs in execution.
That's true.
So
that's true.
So that happened. So yeah. A lot of pharmaceutical companies kind of all banded together and decided to stop using these drugs for execution. So they stopped giving it to prisons and states. Mm-hmm. So suddenly states had no supply for their key drugs. Some switched to pentobarbital, another barbiturate. Others turned to midazolam, a benzodiazepine that works very differently. But here's the problem. Midazolam was never meant for lethal injection. It's a sedative, not an anesthetic. So unlike sodium thiopental, it does not fully block pain. Oof. So here's the new 3-drug protocol, how it works. You get your sedative, midazolam is the new drug. It works slower and doesn't guarantee unconsciousness versus the old drug of sodium thiopental, which knocks the person out unconscious within seconds. Mm-hmm. So if midazolam fails, the prisoner is aware but unable to respond. Then you have the paralytic, vecuronium bromide. The second drug paralyzes the entire body, including the diaphragm. This causes respiratory arrest, meaning the prisoner stops breathing. But if the sedative hasn't worked properly, the prisoner is paralyzed but aware, unable to move, unable to scream, but still feeling everything. Then you have your final drug, potassium chloride. The last drug overloads the heart with potassium, causing it to stop instantly. But if the inmate is not fully sedated, this drug burns through the veins like fire, causing excruciating pain in their final moments. So why do they fail? There are a few reasons. First is improper IV placement. That's what happened with Clayton.
Mm-hmm.
If the needle isn't in the vein, the drugs won't circulate properly. Then midazolam fails to induce unconsciousness. The inmate is still aware but unable to remove. And then drug absorption issues. If the drugs aren't absorbed properly, the execution can go on for hours. Lethal injection was supposed to be more humane, alternative to older execution methods. But as we've seen, it has its own flaws. Serious, painful, and usually unpredictable. Mm-hmm. By the 2010s, major pharmaceutical companies had stopped selling drugs for executions. Pfizer, Roche, and other European drug manufacturers refused to allow their products to be used in lethal injections. Hospira, the last U.S. company making sodium thiopental, like I said, shut down production in 2011. Mm-hmm. So with no access to these drugs, states turned to compounding pharmacies, small facilities that mix drugs on demand. The problem? Many of these pharmacies operate with little regulation, leading to inconsistent drug quality. Some states like Texas and Georgia even pass secrecy laws, hiding the sources of the execution drugs to avoid scrutiny. So without pharmaceutical support, the entire lethal injection process has become unstable. A lot of states have opted out of lethal injection. Mm-hmm. So some states are bringing back older execution methods like South Carolina, Idaho, and Utah. They reinstated the firing squad. Alabama's testing nitrogen hypoxia, where the condemned inhales pure nitrogen, causing oxygen deprivation. And Arizona and Tennessee have restored the electric chair as an option. In 2023, Idaho lawmakers approved firing squad for cases where lethal injection drugs were unavailable. Some experts argue that firing squad might actually be more humane than lethal injection. A gunshot to the heart is almost fatal within seconds, much faster than some botched lethal injections that drag on for hours. I thought it was interesting.
I get the argument on both sides.
My question is, why don't we know, don't you think it should be common knowledge that pharmaceutical companies who, as like America, we have a big thing for big pharma. Mm-hmm. We're like, go get them. Mm-hmm. Ooh, big pharma, we hate you.
You know how I feel about big pharma.
We hate big pharma. That's That's my American accent.
You are American.
Yeah. My thing is why don't we know about don't you think that'd be positive press to know that the pharmaceutical companies don't even want to be involved?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like that should be common knowledge. Hey, these botched executions are happening because pharmaceutical companies aren't giving the proper medication to the states to complete it.
Right.
Because we should probably been able to vote on if our state, we do vote if our state has the death penalty, but on what form of.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we do. Maybe I'm just uneducated. I don't know.
I don't know if it goes into those kinds of specifics.
I don't know. Do we vote on how it's done? I don't know who makes that decision.
But I think, I don't know. I kind of think, I said, I get the firing squad. It's done. It's done. Mm-hmm. And then I think also, I wouldn't be opposed to the nitrous hypoxia.
Well, this is what you said? My opinion is I don't care. It needs to be done humanely. There should be no suffering involved.
Right.
Do I think it needs to exist? Yeah, to some degree. If you're mainly for the families of the victims, if they want it to happen, I think it's their choice. But if the families don't care, I don't think the state should have a choice in that.
Right.
But for instance, that Idaho, what's that? Idaho 4 murders.
Oh, yeah.
So the family of the kids are you better execute him by firing squad. State, if he's found guilty, I want it to be done.
Right.
I think it's just a form of justice, at least for the family.
Yeah.
But I think unless you're in that situation, there's not really any time. We don't really need to have an opinion.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's one of those things where it's so deeply personal to lose someone like that.
I mean, how can we say to get justice for these families? We can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a touchy subject.
Oh, yeah.
Should we, be using medicine to kill? Should we be using I don't know. I don't know that much about execution, but I thought I would.
Okay.
It's tied into medicine and murders, and
yeah, no, that was educational. Very interesting. That was very interesting.
But I mean, if you looked up botched and lethal injections,
there's probably so many.
There's lawsuits, Supreme Court. Oh, it's insane.
Yeah, I bet.
If anyone wants to look into it, look into it. Those are just 2, and they happened in the same year. So just imagine how many actually exist. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's up to the fan. If however they need justice, you have to give it to them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's
who's to say.
Yeah.
If they took it away too, I wouldn't be like fighting it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no clean way to kill someone.
No, there isn't.
So that's kind of the point. There's always going to be something that's going to be less than desirable.
Well, you also have to imagine the mental suffering of someone being on death row for 14 years waiting to die. Like, you'd rather they sit in jail for 50 years and really think about what they did. Mm-hmm. No, I think time is its own suffering.
I mean, I just think if you're in there for, like, doing something that doesn't directly, like, it's not violent.
This is selling drugs, whatever. All we're talking about is someone killing someone.
I feel like
and that purposefully, you not accident.
To be
you killed a family in a drug accident. You don't.
You're never gonna forgive yourself for that.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, but, you're not gonna be put to death. For
yeah. But I think it's one of those things. Yeah, that if you intentionally did something like that to someone, then I think you should be put through the ringer on some level. And I think
I think jail is its own torture. So
yeah, I think you should be there.
It's lethal and does executions
until the end of your natural days, and know that you're never getting out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's the thing.
I think some families are like, with the justice system nowadays, like, a lot of people get out.
I know.
A lot of people get out. They get out in their 80s because it's because they're sick and old, which is like, well,
what do you mean?
Person you killed never got to be old.
So like, why should you enjoy a day out? Yeah.
So I think that's what some families, but like, I think it's up to the families. Like, if you killed someone's daughter and the mom wants you to die from fire, then that's the state. I mean, that's their choice.
I mean, I like when they sentence them to like 5
million life sentences.
And you're like, holy crud. Like, that's definitely sending a message. You know what I mean? Like, no possibility of parole. You're
never getting out.
You're never getting out.
You also see people on documentaries who are trying to escape out of prison every day. Like, they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, prison has to be hell on earth.
Oh, yeah.
I can't.
I imagine it is.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It's hard to say. There's a morality issue. And it's hard to say what the final answer is. But whatever your opinion is, you know that if execution exists, you want it to be painless and quick. Mm-hmm. Not like these 2 executions that went horribly wrong.
Right.
So, that's it, Andy. No pop quiz today, because what am I going to quiz you about? You want me to quiz you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I probably already forgot something.
I might make it tough.
Our friends say they like the quiz part.
Okay.
Pop leave it out.
Quiz. Pop quiz. Pop quiz.
Woo.
What is the 3-drug cocktail?
Oh, come on.
You don't want me to quiz you.
I know. Okay, I know what they do. I can't tell you the names. There's no way. There's no way.
I believe in you.
I can tell
you. Okay, I'll name them, and you tell me what it does. You tell me what it does. Ready?
Okay.
Midazolam.
It's a sedative.
Mm-hmm. The Vecuronium.
That one. That's the paralytic, right? Stops the heart. No. Stops the breathing and moving.
Paralyzes you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then potassium chloride.
That one stops the heart.
Yes. Yeah. Pop quiz. And if you see that I'm messing up in here, please email us. The email is in the show notes. Thank you, mailman. I hope you hear this on your route. Thank you for your service. Mail is important. I hope you're a mailman forever. If you found today's episode interesting, make sure to follow the Medicine Murders on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Podbean, Instagram. All sources, handles, and my email are in the show notes. Andy, you know what time it is. Sign off time. Mm-hmm. Just remember, folks, you don't need a prescription for murder. Dun, 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 dun. Cue the music. We did.